it's resilient and it can take anything. That's exactly what my guest is like today.
Hello to you and a warm welcome to Visionaries. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, many times people look at fashion and they think it's futile or frivolous. But what if I told you that it can be used to rebuild and restore? Our guest today is Rees Mann, and he uses his profession as a fashion expert and entrepreneur to change lives and rebuild the inner city. Let's find out exactly how he does that. He joins us today. Thank you very much for joining us, Rees. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your lounge.
Look, I think I haven't met anybody who loves Johannesburg as much as you do. You're a Joburger through and through. When did your love affair with the city begin?
It started a long time ago. Our family had a clothing production house in the inner city of Johannesburg. And my earliest memories were working during school holidays with my parents. And from then I became very comfortable with the city, and I've always become very comfortable with the city. And then now in Pritchard Street, I've opened up businesses in Pritchard Street, and it's part of seeing the city change from a youngster, and then seeing how it changed in the 80s, and then the urban slum moving in, and then post democracy, seeing new people moving into the city, and then seeing all the foreigners coming into the city. And for me, that was exciting, because if any city in the world, if it wants to become unique, it has to find something that's different. And I think Johannesburg is a Pan-African city. And to a lot of people say there's a lot of foreigners. Being in fashion, there's all the fashion capitals in the world. None of them are homogeneous.
You can say that about New York, you can say that about London,
and Paris. It's always actually the foreigners who come in and create this crucible of change. That change takes place. So after the inauguration of Nelson Mandela, when I watched it, it was probably the worst fashion show that South Africa ever had, because everybody came from West Africa and East Africa, and they looked absolutely magnificent. Well, the South Africans at the first inauguration of their president didn't know what to wear. Do they wear suits? Do they wear safari suits? Do they wear traditional attire? What do they wear? And it was that at that time that I realized what we had lost during apartheid in fashion.
And you revolutionized your family's business when the factory had to close. You spoke about the different stages of the fashion industry in South Africa. There was a time when, you know, there was a flooding of the Chinese imports, and as a result, you know, factories closed down. But you then, even as young as you were back then, decided, I have another way of staying in the industry.
In 1994, when everyone else was fleeing the inner city, Rees decided to set up shop.
The shop only was half of this. It was actually, when you see the change in the color of the tiles here, this was the size of the shop. This whole building was empty for 2 years. Couldn't find a tenant. And just before the general elections, we decided to open up a wholesale haberdashery shop, which is now probably the biggest shop in Africa. For 2 years, I was buying up industrial sewing machines from factories that were closing, refurbished them and sold them on. And as I was selling them on, I actually realized that everybody who was buying them were ex-retrenched workers. And as I was selling sewing machines, people used to come to me for information. How do we do this? How do we do that? And I used to teach them and show them how to do things. And that started me to really understand that there is a new business to be made.
And you did more than just reinvent, because you had this great idea of having a fashion district in the heart of the Johannesburg CBD. Tell us about how you went about doing that. I know you traveled the world to get, you know, the benchmark as to the best kinds of fashion districts, and you brought that information back home. I'll let you tell the story.
I was part of a voluntary organization, Junior Chamber of Commerce, and I managed to visit over 30 countries and train in 30 countries around the world. Wherever I was, I looked at inner cities and the fashion districts. Then I looked at Johannesburg. There was 20 city blocks that were redundant, they were in decay. And I went to the inner city manager and I went to him with this vision about, let's recreate the fashion district. Let's recreate Johannesburg, and using urban regeneration and fashion as part of it. The mosaic that you see over here is just the start of the inner city fashion district. It stitches, it comes from stitches of domestic sewing machines, and there's 4 different designs in the city.
There's a school now that you're running, and you'll fill in the details there. You bought some building blocks yourself, because that's how much you believed in this initiative. But you went on to sort of light a fire, as it were, under the officials to say to them, wake up, this is what could be done. What gave you that drive? I mean, you're a white male in South Africa, in the Joburg CBD. I'm sure a lot of people thought, why don't you just look elsewhere?
I think it might be a reflection of my own life, that rebuilding and redeveloping and reimagining things that were not good. So the city was not good, but I've always had the ability to not look at what the city looks like, but what it can be. We're going to be opening up 4 stores of a training center that will train young entrepreneurs and designers and give them an opportunity to learn those skills, give them sewing machines, do learnerships as well, and then on the upper floors create a vibe where young designers can have their own design hubs. And I think that was the important thing for me. I mean, for example, the school. The school started at Wits Technikon. I was on the advisory board, and the demographics of their students, it was still white. Yeah. And I asked, why is it still white, as a chairman? And they said, oh, you need art. So I said, okay, I'm asking them, because I was chairman, go and do research in Soweto. Find out how many art teachers are qualified, how many art classrooms there are, and come back to me. I knew the answer. And then they came back and they said very few, and I said, so what are we going to do about it? And there was 101 excuses about structures and government and all of that. So I actually then decided, and we went and we started So Africa. And So Africa had a no entrance requirement, because I don't believe that academic record and creativity is always matching.
Schools like this are usually, like, since we're from the townships, we can't get to them because they're usually like in Rosebank or something. But here it's like we can just take one transport to get us here.
Most of the old factories around here, and most of the material stores, and most of the things that have to deal with fashion design are around here. So I think that was a very great idea.
A lot of people with matric who had no art came to South Africa, and it was a bridging program, and then they got into the Technikon. Yeah. Then we had students who couldn't afford to go to Technikon. So we received no subsidy. Our model is very unusual, and we created a school that is half the fees of anybody else with no government subsidy.
You know, your story reads like a fairy tale, it reads like a dream, but I know that you've had tremendous challenges along the way. So when we come back, I'd like to delve a little deeper into that. So stay with us. And while it sounds as if Rees was living an absolute wonderful life, there was quite a devastating secret that he was holding, and we'll find out what that is in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you again for joining us. Our visionary today is Rees Mann, the man with the fashion plan. I loved saying that. I hope you realize, because I just love the work that you do. What has been the most fulfilling part for you in seeing your dream, your vision of having this fashion district, of seeing all this change in the inner city come to pass? What's been the most fulfilling part of it?
I think the most fulfilling part is the opening of the fashion capital as well. Having African Fashion Week have its first show at the week, and then seeing these machinists who I once knew who started with us, and now they're little mini factories and they're employing 15 people, and seeing these students who come to us in the college and just seeing how they grow, that they come in with a lot of baggage. We've all got baggage, and they come with a lot of baggage, and we actually be able to get rid of that baggage and actually look at their creativity and actually see them go on to also be on Fashion Week.
We often talk about women who are victims of abuse, and we should, because it still is a big problem in this country. But very rarely do we talk about the plight of men who are victims of abuse. You are among the first who stood up and said, I was victimized. Tell me about that.
As a child, I was sexually abused when I was 13, and then I was groomed and sexually abused at the age of 17. And when I had to be conscripted, and I had certain political opinions which weren't favorable in those days, and I was gang raped. And I kept quiet with that pain all my life. And I actually became a very good warrior, because I could wear this mask Nobody knew what was happening behind it. So while I'm opening up these businesses, while I'm being considered to be this confident person who's running this ideal life, internally, there's all my struggles. I think a lot of my ambitions and things I wanted to do was trying to prove that the people who did these things to me, that they're not going to be victorious. I'm going to get myself above that.
How did you decide to break the silence?
I was in a fortunate position that I spent 18 months in therapy. And I was fortunate that I could prepare myself to be able to talk about it. And I met my childhood sweetheart when I was 14. And I think that also gave me the strength to get past everything, because I'm married today. And to get the strength and to talk about it was difficult. But I knew I had to talk about it because I knew I had to release that. And I started understanding that by speaking about it, you're evicting the perpetrator, because everything I did, everything I thought, all my actions were really controlled by these people who perpetrated sexual violence against me.
Theirs is a story rarely told. Many too embarrassed to talk about it, let alone report it. These men have suffered all forms of abuse, emotional and even physical.
I was on the brink of committing suicide. They threw stones at objects, like ornaments in the kitchen. They threw it to me, and they used vulgar words, and they beat me.
You get to the police station and report the matters, they don't, the police won't assist you. Why? Because for the fact that you are a man, you have to have your word in your house. Now they find it very funny for a man to come and report a domestic violence against me.
So speaking out was difficult. So I first spoke to my wife, and then it is to speak to your children, and then to speak to the family. And I think it's the support I got, that my whole life was this fear of what people are going to think of me, what people are going to say. And fortunately, I had a very good support group. And that support group gave me the strength to start speaking out. Now, I'm at the same time trying to find help for myself. I can find nothing in South Africa. So I actually have a look internationally. And then I went to 1 or 2 programs internationally. And my life, I thought I was the only person who'd been through this. And it was only when I went internationally that I realized it. And then I came to South Africa, and there's some points in your life where you have to say, it has to be somebody. And that somebody's me.
I'm looking at your family there. Beautiful, beautiful family there. Your daughters, there's your wife, Rose. And I think to myself, this is so important, because you break the stigma and you help to create a country that your daughters can be proud of. When you then took that decision to say, I don't just want to share with my immediate family, but I am happy to let the world know that I refuse to be a victim of this. How difficult a decision was that?
I think it was a difficult decision, but it's a decision I had to make with my family.
Yes.
Because for me, the family is core. So I discussed it with my wife.
Yes.
I discussed it with my children, and I got their total blessing. And, you know, I was always scared of what they would think, but they were so supportive in all of that. And it was very important for me to realize that, and for other men to realize that they're not alone.
When you begin to say the word perpetrator, what comes into your mind is a man. When you say victim, it's a women and children. And I think we must move away from calling titles, and this title suits this one, this title suits this one.
Men never had an opportunity. They never had a platform where they can raise their concerns. That is why you'll see men hanging themselves, killing themselves, doing all these things, because they don't have a platform where they can actually raise their sufferings.
The first time I went public with my story in detail was in a blog. And the blog was of my journey climbing Kilimanjaro. And conquering Kilimanjaro compared to conquering my own trauma that I had experienced in my own life. And once it went out there, I mean, it was nervous, I took a chance, but it was positively reinforced by comments from family, from friends, and from strangers, because then the block started developing and going further.
The Sonke Gender Justice Network says only 3% of men report abuse.
Not a high number of men, for the simple reason that a lot of them do fear to be stigmatized, fear to be isolated by other men, because the social script says you can't allow a woman to dominate you or to violate you, or you can't even allow other men to dominate you. So men tend to die silent.
The Department of Social Development in Gauteng is also concerned about abuse of men. They are also human beings. If abuse is happening against men, it really needs to be dealt with.
My dream is that we actually become redundant. My organization doesn't need to exist. That sexual abuse, when it happens, it's handled when the boys are still young or when the trauma happens, and that they don't have to suffer in silence for 20 years or 30 years before they speak out.
The picture that we're looking at now, this is of you. Is this on Kelly?
Yes, that's on Kelly.
My goodness.
That specific picture I had there, and there was a Chinese group climbing Kilimanjaro as well, and they were all looking at this flag, and they came with the translator, and the translator started to translate, and then she said, "No, don't worry." And that's what people think out there, and they didn't want to discuss it. But on that journey, another male in one of the camps came to me and disclosed to me. He says, I never wanted to talk about it because I thought I was the only one. And he disclosed to me how he was abused by a priest in England.
Isn't it interesting, that oftentimes the victims feel guilty, feels like, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to say about me? When actually they're the ones who have been wronged. So for me, taking back your power and saying, no, society should not be looking at me and judging me. We should be looking at everybody else who are the perpetrators of this gruesome offense. But for me, something that's also remarkable is how you manage to pick yourself up, how you manage to use that as a tool to empower others, and how you manage to see the future in all its splendor. So when we come back, I want us to focus on what you still hope to achieve. So if you're just as interested in what the future has in store for Rees, then stay with us. Welcome back, and we are just about to find out what Rees is going to get up to in the future. What are his hopes and his dreams? But before we do that, I would like to find out who the wind beneath his wing is. And I have a good suspicion that it is his wife, Rose. Rose joins us now today. Rose, thank you so much for being, dragged into the interview. Thanks for agreeing. It's very kind of you.
Absolute pleasure.
How did you two meet? How old are you? He was 14.
Yes, I'm actually a little older than him. We met, 14. I was 15. And we met at the Colton Ice Rink.
My goodness. Still Joburg.
Still Joburg,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, no wonder he fell head over feet, hopelessly in love with you. And was it love at first sight?
No, I don't think so.
No. Was it too
chacharachne? No. We were too young for that at that stage, I think.
It must have been such a great pillar of strength for you to have her in your life.
Absolutely. I think it was a reason for living. It was a reason to trying to get past the trauma that you've been through. It was a reason why I had to survive. And she takes up a very big portion of my heart.
Oh, I love that. So much so that she takes also a big portion of your wrist. Yes. I know you have tattoos with R&R for Rose and Rees. Whose idea was the tattoo? Be honest.
It was my idea.
Was it your idea?
Yes.
I would have blamed it on him, honestly speaking. I love that.
Yes.
And why did you decide to tattoo your arm?
It was our 30th wedding anniversary.
Sure.
And we decided to renew our vows, so we had a family function. And the tattoo artist came and did it in front of everybody.
Really?
Yes.
Let's see. Hold it up for us to see. Oh, yes. Rose and Rees.
Yes.
And you have a matching one as well.
I have a matching one.
Let's see. Oh, and wasn't it painful?
It was very painful.
But you had to smile because there was all those guests and you're like, oh, and yours is much bigger.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And when you look at the tattoo, what comes to mind?
I mean, it's that it's not two R's. And if you actually have a look at it, they're intertwined. So if you take away one, you don't see anything. If you take away the other, you don't see anything. And I think the important thing is why we put it on our arm like this is the permanence. If you stay married for 30 years, it is quite permanent. So now there is a sense of permanence. And it also is the vein that goes all the way to your heart, comes through from your wedding finger all the way up.
I think that's beautiful. There's a story there. There's definitely a story. And I believe there's a story on your back as well, because it's not just your arm that you've tattooed. Tell me about that.
Throughout my life, I've actually had a lot of baggage. And, you know, it wasn't just baggage, it was a trailer of baggage behind me. And I've managed through having a great support system about getting rid of all this baggage. But it is part of me. What happened to me in the past is part of me. And I've actually designed, it was my own design of a tattoo, very symbolic, and it represents the journey I've been through. It represents my family, my parents, my grandparents, my children, my siblings, and it all is intertwined together, and how each factor comes into place.
So the next question, I suppose, is where to from here? What do you hope for your family, for your husband?
For me and for us, I think to continue Rees's work, and we have quite a large staff complement that depend on us. So I think to continue, just to continue what we've been doing.
You echo those sentiments, Rees?
Absolutely. I mean, family for me is I want to be a great grandfather. I want to be able to be a even better great-grandfather.
Oh my goodness.
I really want to do it. And I'd like to become a more active citizen and actually taking more time to actually do what I enjoy. Because the business, when I started the business, it was very ambitious, it was very goal-orientated. And now the thing that actually feeds my soul is actually helping other people. And I think that is, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've done that journey, and this is where I want to now. It's payback. It's payback time for what society, what my family have done for me, what everybody's done for me. It's now to become a bigger contributor.
I think that's incredible. I think that's awesome. I then wonder, what do you do to recharge? Because if you're going to go out and be people-centered, it can be very draining. So how do you relax as a family? Do you go on holidays? What do you do for fun?
I sometimes say time out.
You have to.
Yes, and reel him in a little, because Rees would just run then and not rest. And it's important. So sometimes it's time out and he takes a step back for a while.
Listen to Rose.
I
She's
should
the voice
listen
of
to
reason.
more often, but I've just got an active brain, and it doesn't stop. And I will sometimes share with Rose in the middle of watching a movie or TV. I'll share ideas.
When you're supposed to be switching off.
And she'll say, you know, aren't you watching the show?
And I know you said off air that some of the things that you enjoy are spotting, you know, the inconsistencies in movies. So if you're watching a movie and you see that, oh no, that's not where her sunglasses were, that's something that you do.
Absolutely, and then I'll stop it, and then Rose will say, and I'll rewind it, and I'll say, now look at the sunglasses there, and look at them. Yeah, there's a difference. And I think it's just I am very hyper vigilant in everything I do.
Oh my goodness! So strength to you, Rose, and strength to the both of you. Thank you very much for sharing your journey, and may you continue to inspire many, many men out there. That is the only way that we'll heal as a nation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. I trust that you have really learned from this experience that, you know, sometimes those things that we hide away, those things that we're ashamed of, if you bring to the light, if you share it out, you'll find that you are not alone, and that indeed you can use that to empower yourself and others. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye. God bless you.
Don't look at what things are. Rather imagine and visualize what things can be. When you're angry, rather direct that power that you've got and that energy of anger, rather direct it to something that is going to change the way you feel. And I've lived my whole life by the saying is that if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it.